Call the meeting of the Dutchess County LDC to order. We're going in a different sequence this month. Jasmine, would you please take the roll call for the LDC meeting?
Tim Dean,
Here.
Mark Doyle, Kathy Bauer,
Here.
Amy Bonadiri,
Here.
Jamie Pacone,
Here.
Don Sagliano,
Here.
Al Torrigiani.
Here.
We need to invite anybody in the room?
Not yet, 'cause, we're doing the.
Okay. All right. Conflict of interest disclosure. Just to remind everybody, if anybody feels that they have a conflict of interest with any matter coming before us, I would ask that they state so now and what the conflict is. Okay. I don't hear any. If something arises during the meeting, please let us know and we'll recuse you. Sarah, proof of meeting notice?
Yes.
Okay. Bills and communications?
None?
Approval of minutes of the May 23rd, 2023 meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or modifications to the minutes of that meeting? I would accept the motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Amy. Jasmine, I'm sorry, would you please take a roll call?
Kathy Bauer,
Approved.
Amy Bonadiri,
Approved.
Jamie Pacone,
Approved.
Don Sagliano,
Approved.
Al Torrigiani,
Approved.
Tim Dean.
Approved. Okay, report of the treasurer. Jane, do you have anything for us today?
Yes, I do. Looking at the balance sheet for May 31st, 2023, we have cash at 2.6 million. We have other receivables of 127,000. Of that, 123,000 is the county, and we did receive it just this past week. We have payroll on accounts payable, accrued payroll of 30,000. Looking at the P&L, we have total income of 307,000 to a budget of 926,000. So right now we're unfavorable by 619,000. We have total expenses of 470,000 to a budget of 1,273,000 for favorable to budget by 803,000. We have right now a net loss of 163,000 to a budgeted net loss of 347,000, favorable to budget by 184,000. So right now we're good for budget. There's nothing that's out.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yeah.
So, Jane, on the balance sheet, what is the nature of the payroll deposit for 15,011?
That's been established back when we signed on the staff line back in, I think it's 2006.
Oh, okay, so it's more like a security deposit.
Correct.
I think since that we've been a viable company and a viable client, I think that we ought to be able to have those monies returned.
Okay, I'll look into it.
If they're not satisfied with the creditworthiness of the Dutchess County LDC, then perhaps maybe we should consider a different payroll provider.
We have done that, and they're very good money-wise. And we looked into quite a few others, and there was a.
Oh, you're talking about from a friend. So I don't think that they need to continue to hold their $15,000.
I can check that, though, yeah.
And then you mentioned when you were speaking on the profit and loss so you have the 5 months actual, and you have the budget, which is full 12 months, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So currently, we're at $162,000 loss on an expectation that there's gonna be a $347,000 loss for the entire 12 months. So, to say that we have a favorable variance at this particular point in time, I don't think is really germane, because you're looking at a 12-month budgeted information versus a 5-month actual. And I know that every quarter, we're gonna put
Right.
the actual,
Right.
the budget for that, so, but it is a little bit misleading
Right,
to the user.
at this point of time, the way it's looking, we're favorable, yes, to budget, but
Okay. Thank you.
you'll get a true look from an expense side on when it's on the quarter. again, the revenue is sporadic, so.
Yeah, but what he's saying is that we're gonna hit a negative number at the end of the year regardless, is what it looks like.
Yeah. I think it's a fair comment though, just for us to understand that one's 12 months, one's, much less than that. So, just to keep.
No, but I think it's appropriate that every quarter that we do look, condense the budget, which is a 12-month budgeted or forecasted number, and at least look at where we're at for the 6-month budget, even though there are, there's cyclical ups and downs, primarily on the revenue side. The expense side is fairly static.
Yes. I think 6 months is enough time for any of those some of those cyclical things to balance out. So yes, thank you. Anything else? All right. Any committee reports?
No committee reports.
Okay, and unfinished business.
No unfinished business.
Okay, this leads us to our main discussion of this month. And I just wanted to comment because I was not at the last meeting, but I know that there was some pretty good discussions about this same project, but on the IDA side, where there was a negative vote to proceed from the preliminary application. And then the board tabled the discussion in this entity. And I talked with Sarah and I did look at the actual video of the meeting to try and understand. And just my perception was that it seemed to me that, we as a board, first of all, we usually look at projects either in the IDA or the LDC. It's not very common to us to have one part of it in one and part of it in the other, which makes it for interesting discussions because you're really supposed to discuss matters in the meeting that it's intended for, which with projects that we normally have, it's in the IDA meeting and we've discussed it all, right? So, and so I think that was a little bit complicating factor, but I also think that there was an expectation perhaps by the applicant that it was a more routine matter for us. And like when we handle a pilot and a sales tax exemption or a bond, which we do all the time. This was a type of project that none of us have seen. So my suggestion to Sarah was that we did table the discussion about the bond aspect of this, but I really feel that I would encourage the applicant, and we have gotten some information, to really start at the beginning of how these type of projects work, generally speaking, to educate us on that. What is the normal course that these projects take and why? And then get into the specifics of this bond and the specifics of why this project should be using those tools and resources to go forward. But again, I just think we all need to understand better how these projects, specifically with housing authorities and affordable housing, what their mechanisms are and why they're used. So again, because some of this discussion, because these projects do cross the boundaries of IDA and LDC, there may be some discussion during this LDC meeting that again may be appropriate for the IDA meeting afterwards. But so I'm just pointing out that there may be times when we're discussing things that not only are about the bond before us, but are about matters that can come before the IDA. So just because of the way this is shaking out. So with that, you want to call the?
Yep.
Point of order?
Yes.
This resolution that's under 9A,
Yes.
it was tabled. And I believe under Robert's rules, it has to be brought back from the table. Can we get advice from counsel on that?
Yeah, it should be a motion to now consider that.
Okay.
This is not necessarily reconsider.
No.
That would be on the IDA side where it was denied, but if one to now consider this.
Okay.
The motion and second so that you can begin the
Sure.
discussion, that would be appropriate.
Okay. based on that, would anybody be willing to make a motion to bring the matter before us?
I'll make a motion.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Thank you, Al. Jasmine, would you just please take a vote on that?
Kathy Bauer,
Approved.
Amy Bondieri,
Approved.
Jim DeCohen,
Approved.
Tom Fagliano,
Approved.
Ralph Giordani,
Approved.
Tim Dean.
A point of order, I don't know, since Chairman Dean wasn't at the meeting to table it, can he vote on the motion to bring it back from the table?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's bring the applicant in and let's start our discussions.
Is Mark on Zoom or he's not here?
Mark is not here. Mark is not here.
Morning. A few materials to pass out, if that's okay.
Seven.
Hopefully I don't have copies. Yeah.
Save you how many people are on the
Pass them down?
You wanna give that to Tim?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yep, no problem.
We sit here?
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
She sent out last. Yeah, she sent out last week.
Where's your fans?
Did you want one?
Okay, so,
Sarah?
to make sure that we've got the right people here, it's my understanding that we have Justin Glenda from Related Affordable here, present with us, and Alex Steckler from KeyBank here. Barry Kerrigan, Bond Counsel, Nixon Peabody is online, is that correct?
Correct.
And Sam Adams
We don't
from
have,
KeyBank, is he present or?
He might not be able to make it today.
Okay, so who else do we have from this applicant?
So my name is Zach Simmons. I'm also with Related Affordable. I work with Justin.
Ed, did you say?
Zach.
Oh, Zach, I'm sorry. Zach Simmons? Okay, from Affordable. And anybody else? Okay,
Mikaela Bubba is also on. I'm just listening in. I represent Related Affordable as well.
okay.
Who would that be?
Who's speaking?
Mikaela Bubba is a colleague of ours who's just listening.
Gotcha.
From Affordable?
From Related.
Oh, Related.
And then we have two others on. So Alex is with KeyBank on the financing side, just to make that clear. Jean-Paul Vachon, could you introduce yourself? He's with KeyBank as our limited partner in the investment.
Good morning. I'm with KeyBank Community Development Corporation, representing the investor interest in this.
Great.
And then we have Miriam on. Do you want to introduce Miriam?
Yeah, so Miriam is our counsel from the bond underwriter at KeyBank on the financing side. She is our counsel from Tiber Hudson.
Great. Okay, so maybe as a way to, I think, again, I made some remarks before you came in the room. In maybe the best way to start this process, because this board and the IDA board, which are the same folks, we do pilots and sales tax exemptions fairly routinely. So we understand the concept of how they work. And so it really allows us to immediately get into the what fors and what if not questions specific to the project. But perhaps it would be helpful for this group if somebody would be willing to talk about the infrastructure of how affordable housing projects work from a bond standpoint. And some of the discussion may also, be partly on the IDA discussion later, just if we have one, just because they're intertwined but they're separate for us. But perhaps someone could talk about the tools that are used by affordable housing projects and investors in New York to bring those projects to fruition.
You want to do that? You want me to do that? Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to that. So as I mentioned, my name is Zach Simmons. I'm a senior vice president at Related Affordable. I've been with the company for about 10 years now. Actually, my 10-year anniversary is this month. And in those 10 years, all I've done is affordable housing transactions and what we call in the business acquisition, preservation transactions like this, where we're acquiring an existing building or financing an existing building and renovating it. To give some background or context around how tax exempt bonds and other federal and local financing tools are used to preserve affordable housing. I don't want to go on too much of a soliloquy here, but we'll go back to 1986, which is when the Internal Revenue Code was amended and created the low-income housing tax credit program. Congress at that time realized that there was a dearth of affordable housing development and preservation, and wanted to create a financing tool that would allow private developers to raise private capital to produce new and preserve existing affordable housing. So they created this low-income housing tax credit program, which simply put, allocates low-income housing tax credits to, makes them available for projects, which can then be used to raise equity for those transactions and help finance them. In return for that, developers agree to keep the housing affordable for the long term. There were two types of low-income housing tax credits created: the 9% LIHTC and the 4% LIHTC. The 9% LIHTC is a limited annual resource that is allocated to each state, and then each state comes up with a competitive award process to give away those 9% credits. And in rough terms, the 9% credit is intended to generate enough equity to finance roughly 70% of the development. That's kind of one piece. The second piece is called the 4% LIHTC, and that is as of right, meaning you qualify for the 4% tax credit. So like as of right, no matter what, so long as your project is also being financed by tax exempt bonds. Tax exempt bonds are also allocated to the states by the federal government in a limited capacity. So each state gets an allocation of tax exempt bonds that is roughly based on their population, roughly speaking. Then the state agencies within each state decide how they want to allocate tax exempt bonds. And if a developer receives an allocation of tax exempt bonds, then they get these 4% tax credits as of right, which they can then send to an investor, sell to an investor in exchange for equity.
I'm just going to stop you there for a second. In this particular case, the 4% bond, I'm sorry, the tax credit that's where KeyBank comes into this equation, correct?
That's correct. KeyBank sort of comes in a couple different capacities, okay, which is a pretty common occurrence in our industry. So a number of the financial institutions that ultimately are interested in buying the tax credits. So let me take a step back. Typically, the buyers of tax credits in this business are large banks and large insurance companies, generally speaking, because those financial institutions have large, predictable income, right? I mean, they almost all of them have, kind of steady income that they ideally would like to, against which they can use federal income tax credits. So they sort of know, I'm going to have $1,000 of taxable income next year. If I can purchase $100 of low-income housing tax credits, I know I'm going to be able to use that to offset against the taxable income I'll have next year. It just so happens that a lot of those large banks also have divisions that are very good at multifamily lending and are also very good at selling bonds into the public markets. So for that reason, institutions like KeyBank, or you could name others, will purchase the tax credits, and then they will also, and this is what he does, they'll also sell those bonds into the public markets. So
two separate things.
Two separate
credits, bonds, tax exempt bonds, credits.
And two separate groups within the bank. So even though John Paul, and Sam, and everybody sort of all work under the same umbrella. They work in different parts of KeyBank. So it's kind of like, you know, your fire department and your police department, they're both, and your teachers, they're all employees of the town or the city, but they do very different things.
Okay, and maybe you were going to address this, but in not all cases, do whoever buy these tax credits retain them for their own use? Can they sell those tax credits to others?
They can, typically a bank, there are two types of buyers or investors in affordable, in credits. It can be a direct investor. That would be like a bank like KeyBank or Wells Fargo, or where they have enough capacity, they have enough income themselves, they have built an internal infrastructure that is sophisticated enough to make these investments directly. And then a second group, which is called tax credit syndicators. Those are not banks. They are investment firms, really, that have made a business out of buying tax credits from developers and then syndicating them, selling them to 10, 20, 30, 50 distinct investors. And, you know, they make a bit of a margin for sort of creating a market, really, as it were, for LIHTCs, and then they'll sell them to small regional banks that don't have the capacity to do this directly, to small insurance companies, again, that don't have the capacity to do this directly, some high net worth individuals, et cetera. So in this case, KeyBank is a direct investor. We work directly with them.
So again, just to make sure I understand this, and because of this separation of the IDA and LDC interests in this, the tax credits are really, that would be an IDA. I'm sorry, the
income tax credits are with the LDC.
The LDC, the bond.
Is with the,
Just actually to be even a bit more precise about it, the tax credits do not come from LDC. So the tax credits come from the federal government, and they're suballocated.
Authorizing agency.
Yes, that's
LDC.
Right.
No, that's actually just for the bonds.
That's what I thought.
The tax credits come from New York State HFA.
no, it comes from the New York State Housing Finance Authority, the tax credits.
Okay, what was?
So because those are as of right.
Yeah.
If once they're issued a tax exempt bond, then they can get these tax credits from the Housing Finance Authority.
It triggers it.
It triggers it. It triggers it.
Right, so the bonds, which the LDC would issue, make us eligible for the tax credits, which are issued by the New York State.
Got it, I'm sorry. And the sales tax exemption is what's before the IDA.
Correct.
Now, also, it happens to be that the tax credits and the financing are both with KeyBank, but in theory, and that's who Affordable chose to do business with, is that correct?
That's correct.
They could be other entities. There are other entities out there that have interest. That just happens to be that you've chosen them.
And we recognize that it was probably confusing at the last meeting and is probably still confusing in some instances, and probably created a bit of the conflation. I don't know if conflation is a word. Confusion between, like, the LDC is literally just doing the bonds. It creates this eligibility for tax credits, which, as you say, just so happen to be being sold to KeyBank, but it could be that we would be doing, you know, the bond underwriting with KeyBank and sell the tax credits to Wells Fargo.
Yeah, and just for clarification, KeyBank is treating this as an investor. They are not syndicating and selling the bond, the 4% tax credits. They're keeping them in-house.
I'll leave that to JP to.
Yeah, I can speak to that. It is our intent to be a long-term holder and an investor in this property. And, you know, beyond just the benefit of the tax credits, one of our investment pillars and drivers is to be reinvesting in communities in which we do business. And I know KeyBank has, you know, probably 7 or 8 retail locations in Dutchess County where we're taking deposits and conducting business. And so we want to be an active part of the community as well.
that, just to be clear, are you precluded in any way from syndicating these 5 years from now, if that's a decision you made?
No, we would not be precluded from that.
I just wanted to know, it's not, and that, not your intent, but there's no limitation on you from doing that in the future.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, does anybody have further questions about the structure? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I have one. So this, and I'll open up the floor. So this particular project is an existing project that was built a while ago. What of these types of things were utilized in the original financing or financing since new as part of this, making it affordable now?
Sure. So I can take that. To just reframe this a little bit. So this is an existing 193
Yes.
affordable housing property. It's actually a very interesting one in that it is 100% designated affordable through New York State HFA. There's also a diversity in subsidy assistance that exists on this project today. We have folks that live with this project that make anywhere from $0 to $70,000, $80,000 as allowed for the family size. Some units are assisted by subsidy through the Beacon Housing Authority that was brought up last time. And then some just pay what's called a tax credit rent, which is set based on area median income for the county, all of Dutchess County. Actually, it's for the MSA, which includes Fishkill and Poughkeepsie.
MSA something service area?
It's a metropolitan statistical area.
Okay.
It gets bucketed and that is published annually. It actually just came out in April, May. And based off those incomes for the area, it will dictate what a maximum rent is. So I guess the point of saying all that is this is a very vibrant, socioeconomically diverse community that exists in a very, very favorable location right off of downtown, very close to the ferry stop, which is widely used, the train station as well. This is a community, a resource for City of Beacon and Dutchess County that is just very much needed and needs to continue. The property is now 50 years old. It was built in '73. We obviously weren't involved back then. We came into operating this property in 2018, late 2018. And at the time, it was not eligible for all, for what we're talking about here, which is a syndication or preservation. There's different terms that are used to describe this. But what it all means is we are extending the commitment, or renewing the commitment to keeping this property as affordable housing.
When does the current commitment expire?
So the current commitment, because there's this layering, there's a few different elements of it. I don't have all the dates in front of me. The New York State HFA agreement goes out into the 2040s. So there's term left on that. And then the Beacon Housing Authority, what's called a HAP contract, stands for Housing Assistance Payments. It doesn't cover the whole site. It covers 61 out of the 193 apartments. That expires in 2040. It is deemed affordable right now, and that wouldn't necessarily change. There's a pilot in place that wouldn't go away. But, the do nothing scenario, nothing would change. What this meeting and investment meeting is about is driving resources and allocating capital to renovate this property, which will we've owned for a few years now. We've been operating it within our means as best as possible. I put together an FAQ. I would hope, if you have a chance to read that. It came out a few days ago. I tried to describe, this is just my own prose about, why I think this is important, why we think this is important. But this is a community that it has a lot of original components that existed before our time. It's outdated in many ways. It's a well-maintained, safe community to live in. But these communities don't have another means of investment. This is how investment is done on affordable, whether it's existing affordable or new affordable. You can't just go into a facility like Tompkins Terrace, like a value add investor would do, put in $50,000 per apartment, and then raise the rates to market in Beacon, which would be astronomically higher than what exists today. And that's how you pay for your renovations. You would leverage up against that higher rent and you would be able to finance renovations and that's not possible in this case because the residents, wouldn't be able to afford that. If this was an unrestricted site, they would all be, the rents right now would be much higher than they are in effect. And with renovations and improvements, they would be even, hundreds of dollars higher per unit. So this is a way for KeyBank through the tax credit program to make a large investment. $15 million is what we've been talking about. That number's been thrown about. And that is going into the improvements, which is in this packet. There's page
Has everybody had a chance to read the package?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
This talks about our scope of work, which is really what, the driver of what we're talking about. I do want to make one last comment on the bond piece, not to go on the financing elements.
That's okay.
This is a full-scale renovation. We're in the $70,000 per range per apartment. We're in all of the units doing 100% upgrades. I showed some renderings of, the siding, new roofing. The roofing is 20 years old. Again, predates us. The property has capital reserves and we use those economically to maintain this project as best as possible today. But these are large scale, millions and millions of dollars of improvements. And, as far as the timing considerations of this go, I do want to just make a comment about, last meeting. I know, I want to apologize if that came off as abrupt or sudden. We've been talking with the executive director about this project since last fall, and there's just been some scheduling difficulties and conflicts. We put our application in March and we just really wanted to continue our momentum of this project. A few reasons being, one, we're in just very turbulent economic situation with us, but with the economy, like interest rates are moving very volatilely in this climate. Construction costs are increasing by the quarter. And so, the project is viable today. There's no guarantee it's viable in 3 months or 6 months from now. And we would have commitments and deadlines with our investor and KeyBank and the New York State HFA to finish the project in a certain amount of time in order to deliver the tax credits on schedule. If we don't, we would lose funding. If we lose funding, the project's not viable.
So just one comment on that while I'm thinking about it. And then I know it sounded like there was some question, by the board about why was it brought to the special meeting? And so I just wanted to let the board also know that Sarah and I had actually spoken because we had called the special meeting for other reasons. Sarah had said to me, maybe it makes sense since everybody's being called in to have this project discussed at the special meeting. So, which I agreed. So it wasn't necessarily that we were feeling pressured. It was just, we had a meeting anyways. Why not add this to the agenda? So I want to be clear that Sarah wasn't pressured. It was really a discussion between us as to why not. Talking about these types of projects, again, not this specific one, but you have, how does the various regulatory bodies that help you with this affordable housing and, being eligible for credits and running these places, how do they differentiate between what I would call repairs and maintenance versus capital projects? In other words, one of the questions I think was, well, why wasn't some of this stuff, it's 50 years old. Why did some of this stuff things that should have been done over time within the budgets of the operating budgets, as opposed to a need for, a capital project raise? Is that, how do you differentiate those two?
Yeah, I think certainly, so just to add a little bit more context to what Justin said in his last answer, this project was renovated, redeveloped by a company called Aimco. They're a REIT that actually recently rebranded. Anyway, back in the early 2000s, so nearly 20 years ago at this point. The rehab they did was kind of light, I would say, in comparison to what we're proposing to do now. And, as you have an aging building, just the things that you can do out of the annual cash flow of project are limited in nature. You can't, this property does not produce millions of dollars in cash flow per year. And so, investing $15 million into this project would be, this isn't, just 10, 20, 30 years of cash flow, something like that. And so this allows us to leverage several different financing sources, private financing sources, to invest in one time in a bunch of things that the property needs. We do, and over the years it has been maintained, but things like roofs and siding and windows and new playgrounds and that sort of thing, they have a life cycle, and over time it's hard to do them simply out of the cash flow that's available from the property. Does that help answer your question?
I would add to that, we can't necessarily speak for what was done prior to 2018. All the, reserves were likely maintained by the prior owner. We certainly maintain the reserves that are required of us by the state. We have inspections that are done by city and maybe county officials too, and we're addressing immediate needs, life safety needs. To do everything in one shot, as Zach was explaining, this is a lot of money. There's not just $15 million sitting around at the property kind of level entity for this scale of comprehensive scope of work. So it allows us to do it all at one time and raise the money efficiently. And this was the comment I wanted to just make quickly on the on the tax exempt bond piece, and Alex, maybe you can help me out on this, is, this is, private capital. These bonds are sold on the public market. This isn't like the Dutchess County IDA or LDC's balance sheet or credit that's out there. It's credit enhanced by Fannie Mae with KeyBank as a servicer basically originating this loan. And ultimately it's the property that serves as collateral on the mortgage and is serving to fund the bonds to the ultimate bondholder. It's not Dutchess County providing a $25 million capital into the project. It's just a conduit bond in that respect.
And the last thing sometimes when someone else is speaking, it gives you a chance to think. So the last thing I would add is two things really. One, a lot of this stuff does involve disruption of residents, replacing windows, replacing roofs, going in and renovating a person's home is a disruption to their lives. There's no doubt about it. But if you could do it all over a 12-month period and in one relatively concentrated period of time, and also engage a resident advocacy group that helps them with all their relocation and have a management team that's really fully focused on this sort of thing, it makes it a little bit easier. So that's, to Justin's point, sort of the benefit of doing it all at once. In addition to financing all at once in an efficient manner, you also make the disruption a bit more efficient, for lack of a better way of putting it.
All right, I'm going to shut up. I've asked a bunch of questions, but I'm going to open it up to the floor now. Is there other questions about the conceptual way that these affordable housing projects, and in this case, it's an existing project that you're proposing to do some major capital renovations to. Does anybody have any questions about how that works from a taxing, from our involvement basis before we get into the project themselves? Don, is there anything that you wanted to say at this point?
I do want to say that Barry.
I'm sorry, Don.
Oh, this Don.
No, I'm not you.
Council.
Council Don. Council Don, I apologize.
That's why we shouldn't sit back. Barry Carrigan from Nixon Peabody is their resident expert on LIHTC, the
LIHTC.
low income housing tax credits.
Right.
And so Barry is here just to give you his insight into the structuring and essentially say that this is a typical structure He's the resident expert. He
Okay.
does a lot of work for
He's our
IDA.
bond, he's the bond counsel for the.
He's for us,
Right.
and so he's there to help you, if you have any questions.
So, Barry, thanks for joining us. Could you let this, make some comments to this group as to, do you feel that this is something that is within the confines of, what you see out there? Any differences? What's your perspective on this?
Sure. Thanks for letting me join this morning virtually. This is a sort of structure that is common and has been utilized across New York State. We have worked not necessarily with this development team, but with this structure in other communities, including Westchester as bond counsel, and again, as sort of in different roles in different communities throughout the state. Everything that, has been mentioned so far is consistent both with our understanding of the LIHTC program, the tax exempt bond program, and what other, underwriters and issuers have done. It was our recommendation to look at splitting this approval process to issue the bonds through the LDC and then do a straight lease with the IDA for the sales tax. We have been recommending that for a couple reasons, but basically the way the market looks to these types of transactions, especially when there's other potential issuers involved, whether it would be a housing authority. Housing authorities can make loans. IDAs can't make loans directly. They have to tie up the real estate in like a leaseback or sale leaseback sort of structure, which adds complexity to the financing documents that wouldn't be needed if you issued through the LDC. And since there was no need for a pilot because they went through the city directly for the pilot, this structure really made a lot of sense. Happy to discuss further if people have any questions.
The pilot, it remains in place and it goes for how long?
So they actually negotiated a new pilot
Okay.
with the city for this project. And it goes for 30 years, I believe, 40 years.
Which
And is-
ties to the affordability commitment that we'd be reinstating with both them and with the HFA.
Okay, so the agreement is in place, but it would not go in effect unless the other aspects of this fall in place?
Correct.
Correct. And to be clear, though, there is an existing pilot that relates to the development going back to when it was originally built in 1973. And that would continue, I believe indefinitely, for what we understand.
Okay.
It could be renewed at least if it expires.
Well, it'll go indefinitely as long as the project remains affordable.
Yeah.
If the project were to no longer be affordable, the pilot would be terminated.
Yeah, it ties back to the Uniform Development Corporation statute, and this is beyond my knowledge, I'm not an attorney, but it's under the private housing finance law in New York State, and that was how it was set up, and it deemed, the documentation is there and can be provided.
So all of these things that are in place, the beacon agreement, the pilot, the New York State HE something that you talked about, are any of those cancelable? Because they go on till, you said, into the 2040s. Could an owner say, we're done, we want to terminate and go in another direction?
Go marketable rents?
Yeah, in this case, typically there is often an option to do what's called a qualified contract, where you basically say, I'm going to eliminate the affordability if someone wants to buy it for a market price with no affordability. To keep it affordable, great, but if not, I can turn it market. I don't think that option exists in these documents. So, that is something that being said, there are lots of folks that operate in this space that have kind of long-term capital available to them where they will buy good real estate in good locations and say, I'm just going to sit on it and wait for 15 years and then take it market in 2040 or so when the use restrictions expire.
So, Okay, so right now, these are not really cancelable.
That's correct. That's
And in this particular case, I would assume that one of the, as we get into the details, one of the options then would be that these types of capital investments into upgrades would not take place. That's also a possibility if
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe to answer the question that you're sort of saying or asking or saying may come up is like, if this project does not happen at this time, or if the bonds are not available, the LDC is not interested in issuing the bonds, we'll have to reevaluate, right? Like, this is a project that we believe needs a capital infusion. The amount of resources that could be generated from just doing sort of a conventional refinancing with no new equity, no tax exempt bond financing are significantly lower than the amount of capital that we can generate through a tax exempt bond finance transaction. The low income housing tax credit equity in this deal alone is about 12 or 13 million dollars, which would be unavailable if the bond financing was not available. So we'd have to reassess. As Justin alluded to, we acquired the partnership interests in this property, in this partnership in late 2018 from Aimco, when the property was in what's called its initial compliance period, which is the 15 years after it's been financed by tax credits. So Aimco did their initial rehab in the early 2000s, and we acquired the partnership interests during the 15-year initial compliance period with the express goal of waiting until the end of that period and then applying for new federally subsidized financing sources like we're doing right now. That's kind of what we do. There's a bit of a inefficiency in the market such that many developers are unwilling to put their own capital at risk to buy a deal when it is not eligible to be financed by tax exempt bonds and low income housing tax credits. We think that is, and so what then ends up happening is deals get to what we call in the business year 15 of the compliance period. They're now eligible to be financed with a new round of bonds and credits, but at that point, it's really hard to convince your limited partner that, you should go in and do a re-syndication. Typically, they'll just say, just sell it on the market. And then properties get sold to the highest bidder. Many times that is not the buyer that, is going to do a big reinvestment into the property. So I recognize that got a little bit, but
more is better than less right now.
Yeah, but my point in saying that is like, we sort of saw an opportunity here to get control of a property that we felt like we could go and raise, a bunch of resources in 2022, 2023. So this has sort of been our plan all along for the last 4 years. And that's not to say like, therefore you should do it. It's just to say like, if it doesn't work out, then like, we'll have to reassess, and that may include a sale of the property.
Yeah,
and I would add to that, while related companies broadly has expanded its breadth and reach. Like any good company, it expands its business. It goes into different lines of businesses. We build, there's office associated with related codes generally, retail, high-rise
Most
condos.
people know us for big shiny buildings in New York City is what you're trying to say.
And why I'm saying that is because the affordable piece to the related companies and related affordable, while this specific platform doesn't date back to 1973, the roots of related dates back to affordable housing, 1972, 1973 inception. And our business, our platform doesn't do, what was just conversed about there about qualified contracts. There's also this concept of planned foreclosure where, there's kind of, things that go on where a developer will, basically force a foreclosure event with a bank And in foreclosure, under the documents, most of these LIHTC documents, the affordability is wiped out when the property is foreclosed upon because the bank has taken it back and then they can do whatever they want with it. But there's side agreements where the property is immediately acquired back by an affiliate and then it's all of a sudden it's market in a year and who knew what happened. And the IRS hasn't taken a position on that. And, I'm saying all that because we are not doing, that. We have never taken a existing affordable unit out of the affordability programs. We only maintain them. We don't exit the programs. We don't do qualified contracts.
I think Related was founded in affordable housing. So Related is a 50-year-old company that started by building and developing and financing affordable housing. Over time, we've gone into mixed use. We've gone into luxury development. To the point where we're now known for Hudson Yards, we're now known for luxury residential in New York City. But we have retained, the company has retained its commitment to affordable housing for the last 50 years. And our group, our team, what we do is incredibly well supported by the executive team at Related. And everyone at Related is very, very proud of the fact that we've never taken a deal out of affordability. We've never taken an affordable unit market. And so this is sort of the business we do, and we work really, really hard to marshal the resources and work with private institutions that are also committed to this space to bring a lot of capital to reinvest in these communities.
I'd like to use that as a segue, if it's okay. Representatives from KeyBank, talk about what your history and staying power is in this type of investment, and why KeyBank is a good partner with Related on this. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, so KeyBank, both through our equity investments and our various lending platforms, has partnered with Related on, Justin, what do we think here? Probably 7 or 8 different deals since 2019. So we have a really strong working relationship, and their involvement in this transaction was actually one of the first things that drew us to this as an attractive investment. KeyBank, especially when we're doing investments within what we call our CRA footprint, deals that, will get us credit under the Community Reinvestment Act, are deals that we always intend to buy and hold. I don't have any stats offhand for you, but I can't foresee a situation in which we would be looking to do a secondary sale on an asset or on an investment like this.
Okay. Do you do these with other developers as well besides Related, or is it just a relationship that you have with Related specifically?
Well, I don't want them to know that we cheat on them, but we do we do these investments with a number of developers, and this, as Barry was talking about before, this is a very, very typical structure for these types of investments. And we work with a number of partners across the country to facilitate affordable housing through exactly these types of transactions.
Okay. Great. Okay. So I would like to open it again back up to the board. Does anybody, let's talk about this project. I mean, we have talked about it some already, but let's get into some specifics that you may have.
Would it be more appropriate for the IDA? That's where, should we talk about it all?
Well, go ahead, Sarah.
I'm sorry. For the LDC, I think it's appropriate to talk about it at the LDC because we're talking about the tax exempt bond, which is really the bulk of the financing of this project. It's just a small portion, I would say, is the sales tax thing.
But I think because, I'm sorry, continue on.
But I was going to ask if you want me to kind of do some background before we talk about the project itself, or do you think the board is familiar with the background?
I prefer if we go right to question. We
All right.
leave it as
I think so.
second meeting.
Yes.
They got 5 people here. Obviously, somebody's making a lot of money that they would spend $5,000 in staff time to come and present this. So
I think
I'd like to go right to question.
Yes. Okay. Who's got questions?
Ladies first.
Okay, I just you mentioned a couple things about like the displacing of the residents. And I know doing a renovation myself, how disruptive kitchens, bathrooms can be. And then I remember reading something about food pantries and stuff like that. How are you going to help the residents during this project?
So I'll take the relocation question. You can talk about Fairground and other sort of community engagement initiatives. So on relocation, we do recognize that it's disruptive. Just as a starting point, there will be no permanent displacement, no permanent relocation. If any resident that currently lives at the apartment complex will be entitled to remain there if they wish. The units will take about 3 weeks to do. The residents, we're currently working with our general contractor to determine if work can be done between the hours of 9 to 5, and they would be given an opportunity to stay in the community room, or we have many working families here. So they would either be in the community room during that time, or, at work or what have you. And then the unit would be tidied up at the end of the workday. If that is not possible, what we have been doing more commonly particularly since COVID, is that residents are not in their unit for the 2 to 3 week period that the unit is being renovated, and they are housed either in an on-site vacant unit. So we have a number of vacant units that get furnished and cleaned and that sort of thing. Particularly with kids and families, we like to keep folks on site as much as possible. So they'll basically move into that hospitality suite for the period during the renovation of their unit, and then would be moved back to their unit once it had been renovated. That hospitality unit would get cleaned, and the next family would move in there, and that sort of shuffling
Swing space
goes on. Yeah, just a couple other logistics. We provide and pay for movers and packers and to pack up their belongings. Those items are then typically moved into either the center of the unit or to a pod while their unit is being renovated. And then residents or households are also always given an opportunity to stay with friends and family if they wish, only if they wish, and given a stipend for doing so. So that's sort of how the relocation works. Justin, if you want to talk about Fairground and some of the community engagement, does that answer your question on relocation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so sure. On the service, call it the service side, we're involved specifically since the pandemic with Fairground Community Kitchen, which is actually based in Beacon. We've also provided support through our private foundation, which is connected to Related, to Cat Duchess, which is another food pantry organization in the county here. To date, I think we provided like $160,000 of funding for Fairground, which goes beyond just our community, Tompkins Terrace specifically. It provides resources in the greater Beacon town. There was a food pantry set up on site. And then I wanted to add to your comments about just other benefits on the scope. We're adding a Wi-Fi program campus-wide at Tompkins Terrace. It's an amenity that we wouldn't otherwise be required to provide. We want to provide it. In this instance, it upgrades the value of the property. It's a resource that numerous residents need. It's demand that's out there to help bridge the digital divide. So much is done online. I don't need to go into those specifics with classes and job hunting and resume help. Upgrades to community spaces are another one that otherwise wouldn't be able to be done. So we're at a business center. With the top computer stations for residents use within the community. They can come in, log on, print, as well as a fitness area. There's no current recreation gym. So we're looking at remodeling the existing community facilities and putting in an exercise room that would be for resident use only and guests, but not outside, not public. The same with the computer stations. So those are new amenities for benefits of the residents. We continue to explore other partnerships in the county and in the city of Beacon, but Fairground is one we support to date, and we love working with them.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, other questions? Don? Jamie?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, born and raised in Beacon, Tompkins Terrace is a vital complex serving low income. With the recent gentrification of Beacon, affordable and low income is much needed. And having walked this parcel, it's in a great area. You can walk to Main Street, you can get to the train. Actually, Rodney Weber's building, I think, 250 units right across the street. So this is a hidden gem. It definitely needs a facelift, and I'm all for it. I think it's fantastic. And Beacon Housing with the HAP contracts, I worked with them for years. They are one of the top-notch organizations in New York State.
Yeah, we work with Ron. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, my question is, got a couple. So there's 193 existing units, right? You mentioned that there's some vacancies at this particular point in time that you would utilize to hotel the residents through a transition?
That's right. I think there's 5 to 10 current vacant units. It's relatively low vacancy.
And which category would they be in? Would they be in the HAP category, the MHT category, or the 37 units that are not listed in either category?
It's probably a mix, yeah.
Okay.
I'd have to.
And these 37 that are not in the HAP or the MHC, are they at market value rent? Are there any subsidies associated with that? Because that's like 20% of the property.
They would be affordable, they're all affordable designated. Could you refer to the stage, sir?
Well, I did the math on my own. So you state that there's 193 units in your narrative here, right? And then you further on the pages aren't numbered, so under affordability, it says that there are 38 units, 61 units under the Beacon, under the HAP, right?
Oh, I see where you're at. Yes, sir. So there's 61 units that are under that HAP that's been mentioned. So Beacon Housing Authority, it's a project-based rental subsidy agreement. The 95 is just a note. So there's other types of vouchers in play that are called tenant-based vouchers that a low-income family is awarded by. It could be Beacon Housing Authority, it could be another housing authority. They have that in their possession. They can use it wherever it's accepted, wherever it pays sufficient to live at the community. We accept those. We are not allowed to bar those residents from using it at our property. We're happy to have them there. So that's 95, and then the other, call it 37, would be affordable designated LIHTC only units where they pay that maximum tax credit rent, which is based on these area median incomes of about $60,000 for what's called a 50% unit and $71,000 for a 60% unit. So the rent would be those numbers divided by 12 times 30.
The tenant-based vouchers, you have to accept that as the rent for that unit. You can't make them pay an additional amount over that?
Correct.
Okay.
That was rural opportunities back in the day. We used to, Beacon Housing, and we had the contracts from, where the tenant would have their own voucher and they would take it to their facility. It was rural opportunities in Wappingers.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Because those vouchers you can't afford a market apartment in Beacon. Their vouchers for like $1,600 for a family and the rent's $3,000.
Thank you. Moving on to.
No, I just wanted to clarify, sorry.
So you mentioned that you purchased the property in 2018 from a prior owner, and it was done via a limited partnership or a general partnership. So who are the members, who is the current owners of the partnership, or was there a complete entity change?
Related, it's 100%.
You own 100%, but through a general partnership?
And a limited partnership.
Okay, so you have a general partner and a limited partner, but in essence, it's all related or related.
Correct.
Or related entities, parenthetically.
That's correct. Both big R and little r related entities.
Yes.
What was the last time the question?
Well, the question that we had that I had posed last time with KeyBank, and I don't think you had all the appropriate players on to be able to distinguish it, because we weren't able to determine, number one, what the rate of the bond, the tax rate, whether it was a 4% bond, tax benefit or the 9%. So you've now clarified that the tax credits are 4% for this particular deal. And then there was some question with regards to on the Key Bank side, because you had your broker dealer people and the other, and you didn't like, it really didn't look like you guys did your homework beforehand, and there was a lot of confusion. And we weren't able to really interpret it that well as to where it was going. So now, Key Bank, you say your intent is currently, we're not going to go to the private market or put a syndication together for the high net income or high net worth individuals or other single purpose entities that may be looking for a tax benefit. Obviously, you could buy a tax credit. They're traded all the time. So, but your intent is that you're going to hold these, Key's going to hold these as their requirement to fulfill the requirements under the Community Reinvestment Act, I believe. Is that accurate? So that's been, cleared up a bunch. So, so I'm basically done. I just wanted to understand the total numbers of all the units, because when I started, putting them side by side, it wasn't really clear that there was, that it's so the entire property is under.
It is currently affordable, 100% affordable.
And it will retain that way.
Continue to be that. And the affordability restrictions will be extended. They will go for a longer.
And you mentioned that your GC says that they can turn these apartments around in 21 days.
Yeah.
I would caveat that and say there's an ADA mandated upgrade for about 10 to 12 units that have to be fully ADA accessible under UFAS. And those typically take longer, maybe 6 weeks, because you're basically demoing the unit down to the studs to reconfigure it.
So at any one time, how many of the current residents would be, hoteling where they're displaced out of their home?
Typically, on a project of this size, it'll be between 10 and 15.
So like 10 and 15 will be, and then as you roll them, you move them through.
That's right.
Move them on from one to the other. And all the tenants, the current residents will have the ability to go back into their exact unit?
The only exception to that may be for ADA units.
Okay.
Sometimes we change, we make a unit ADA accessible, and it is therefore that needs to be occupied by someone who is handicapped or otherwise. And so that unit, there may need to be a transfer, but in general, yes. As a general rule, yes.
Okay.
I want to be clear about something. I was not here. I think that the board fulfilled their role perfectly in what took place. I think that information needed to be understood. And so I don't think that anybody, has to apologize for anything. And we still have a vote to take place. But I just want to thank the board for asking the questions they did at that meeting and to make sure that we fulfilled our obligation to make sure this project is a good project and to make sure our obligation is to answer those what if and what for. If this doesn't go through, what would happen? We want to make sure that, it's maybe not our direct taxpayers' money here, but one way or another, it does come back to our county residents. So, I think it was very appropriate. And if it resulted in a meeting like this where we got more information, then that's what it took. So again, nobody here on this board, should feel bad about what took place. Other questions?
Job creations. There was the application said there really wasn't going to be a job creation. It was just going to be retaining employees, but then the write-up we received last week mentioned 40 jobs, full-time jobs.
40 full-time construction
Okay.
jobs for about a year, perhaps more, 14 months even. Right now, there's management staff that runs this facility. There's 3 office workers. There's also 3 full-time maintenance folks. So 6 total. There's also a janitorial service that occurs third party. All 6 of those positions, of course, would be retained. They're critical to the operation of the facility.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. what I would like to do, let's just get a sense of where we are at. Would somebody be willing to make a motion?
I'll make the motion, please.
Second.
Jasmine, would you please take a vote to see if everybody, who's in favor of this preliminary inducement resolution?
Amy Bondieri,
Approved.
James McComb,
Approved.
Don Sagliano,
Approved.
Kathy Bella,
Approved.
Al Torriani,
Approved.
Tim Dean.
Approved. Thank you all for helping us to understand this project better and for clarifying everything. Okay. Okay, so don't
Don't move.
Okay, no.
Do we have a little break here?
Yes, first of all, we need to adjourn this meeting of the LDC. Is there anything else that needs to come before us? The only comment I want to make before we adjourn was that, and again, thank you. It's a general comment that could apply to the IDA or the LDC, but Sarah sent a report out, and I don't know if all of you had a chance to look at it. It was by Camoin Associates for the New York EDC. And one of the things that I noticed in there, which made me very proud, was our county stood out for housing in the number of projects that we had approved, both for regular housing and affordable housing. So at a time when housing is a huge challenge in the state of New York, I think we've been very responsive to helping to move projects along related to housing in general and affordable housing. So that was very good to see. Okay, so we adjourned the LDC meeting.